Session 62 of the Law of One. Let's learn here about the psychic attack of 5th density entity to Don, Carla, and Jim, and the Orion group. Let's begin. This session is almost completely dedicated to the psychic attack that the LNL research group was having during the raw contact, which I have mentioned before and we have talked about, even though it wasn't as explicit as it will be in this session. We have seen in other sessions how they were raw mentioned that they had lower energy, well, not them, but Carla had lower energies, vital energies, because of certain attacks, and there were other mentions here and there, but not specifically as this session. So this is why Don, I guess, decided to go into that line of questioning. And we will begin. There is some Orion group questions later on, but the vast majority of this first part, at least, it's a long session. So I'm going to cover at least in 2 parts. We'll see. I'm just going to let it run and see how far I get. And then I'll continue with the rest next week. But this first question I never ever included because is Ra's usual greeting, just saying, I am Ra, I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. Or I communicate now. That's a funny thing that happened in, I think, session 80 something, where Don said, most of the time you say we, but you said I this time. And I checked, and it's like 20% of the time, I think it was 20 something sessions where they say I communicate now as opposed to we. And I'll mention this when we get to that session, but Ra's answer was like, plural, singular, doesn't matter. It's us, it's I. It doesn't make sense to us. So, whatever. I don't know why I'm mentioning this, but what I'm saying is that this usual greeting that is categorized as question 0 or 62.0, as you will see, I never include it because it's just the usual greeting, and I just don't, sounds maybe bad to say that I don't want to waste time on that, but just like I don't include the last question or their closure of the session unless there is some good material there. But anyways, let's get into the greeting, because it's important to set up the reason why they started asking about the psychic attack. So Ra's introduction in this session says, before we begin, may we request that a circle be walked about this instrument, and let then each of the supporting group expel breath forcibly, approximately 2 1/2 feet above the instrument's head, the circle then again being walked about the instrument. Then there is a pause, and they do this as directed by Ra. Then Ra continues and says, I am Ra. We appreciate your kind cooperation. Please recheck the alignment of perpendicularity and we will begin. And so they went and checked the alignment, and Ra says finally, I am Ra. We communicate now. Now to this, Don says, could you tell me what was wrong, or what caused the necessity for the rewalking of the circle and the purpose of the expelling of breath? Ra explains in question 1, this instrument was under specific psychic attack at the time of the beginning of the working. There was a slight irregularity in the words verbalized by your sound complex vibratory mechanisms in the protective walking of the circle. Into this opening came this entity and began to work upon the instrument, now in trance state, as you would call it. This instrument was being quite adversely affected in physical complex distortions. Thus, the circle was properly walked. The breath of righteousness expelled the thought form, and the circle again walked. So, I don't want to get ahead of myself because the relevant questions will come, but this was a ritual, just to refresh you. I think this was the circle of one that Ra gave instructions for. I think it was in session 2, maybe session 1. I think it was session 2, where they gave this this ritual for the walking of the circle, and then Ra gave the instruction here to expel the breath. Both Don and Jim had to do it on Carla, because there was an irregularity in the way they pronounced the words. I am not at all familiar with the rituals and how perfectly they maybe perform. I know that certain advanced, let's call it, I don't want to call it sects, because that sounds terrible. Sounds like negative, but groups and let's use the word sects without the negative connotation, but just a group of acolytes and masters that perform rituals and so on. Could be shamans, could be Tibetan Buddhists, it could be anything really. And what they do is very specific. They have very strong rituals. So how this affected them in pronouncing the words, I don't know what happened, but that's what Ross is referring to, the words verbalized by your sound complex vibratory mechanisms. And so because there was a mistake, then there was an opening for the negative entity to come and affect Carla, like work directly on Carla into the distortions that were her Achilles heel, which is the physical distortions. So then they had to walk the circle again, and the breath of righteousness expel the thought form, and then the circle again. So that's Ollie being affected. So the next question is Don asking, what was the nature of the thought form or its affiliation? And Ra says the thought form was of Orion affiliation. So yeah, no surprise there. Don says, was the attack successful in creating any further distortion of the instrument's physical complex? Ra says this is correct. Don says, what is the nature of this distortion? And Ra explains, this thought form sought to put an end to this instrument's incarnation by working with the renal distortions, which, although corrected upon time-space, are vulnerable to one which knows the way to separate time-space molding and space-time distortions, which are being unmolded, vulnerable, as before, shall we say, healing. Okay, so the wording here is so intricate that I think this is where I will earn my bread for today. So okay, it is a Orion group. I think we've known this. I don't know if this was said before. Maybe not. But it is a Orion group. I don't think there's any surprise there. Was there an effect on the body? And Ra said yes. And then what was the effect? Ra says this thought form sought to put an end to this instrument's incarnation, basically kill Carla, by working with the renal distortions, kidney distortions. Although corrected upon time-space, are vulnerable to one which knows the way to separate time-space. Okay, so let me give the background first. Carla, when she was very young, I think she was a teenager, or an early teenager, it's probably like 12, 13, she had issues with her kidneys, kidney failure or renal failure, and she was obviously operated and saved back then This is the time where I think she had given up on her life. She actually wanted to die. And then she had this experience which returned her to life, and she lived over 60 years more. So in any case, after that, she was still affected in her kidneys, and she ended up going to Mexico. I think it was Mexico, that's where Pachita was. Pachita was a psychic healer, very known, very well known actually. And this was, I guess, in the 50s or the 60s. I'm not sure of the date, but you can learn a lot more about Pachita. She's really popular in these in this arena of spirituality, and I mean, she was just phenomenal. Whatever, you know, she was and she did was just pure metaphysics and really high consciousness work. So Carla had some experience with Pachita. She went and had psychic surgery, and there was something that she worked. You can actually find this information in book 1 of The Law of One, where you will see that Carla is explaining her procedure with Pachita, although in an explanatory way of telling how psychic healing or psychic surgery has been researched or hasn't been researched and so on. But anyhow, you can go read the whole thing. Why am I mentioning all of this? Because this is what Ra is referring to here when they say that even though this thought form sought to put an end to this instrument incarnation, so the thought form tried to kill Carla by working with the renal distortions that she had. Although they were corrected in time-space, this correction upon time-space was Pachita. Even though they were corrected upon time-space, are vulnerable to one which knows the way to separate time-space molding and space-time distortions. So these distortions have been healed in time-space. This is the healing that Pachita did. You see, the way I perceive this, and I may be off by some degrees here, but not too far, is that allopathic medicine, our conventional medicine, is concerned with space-time healing, which is what we know as treating the symptoms and cutting the cancer, bombarding the cancer, attacking it literally, physically. This is what allopathic medicine does, space-time healing. Whereas time-space healing actually makes a different healing, which is the one from within. And I would think that this is not complete healing, because this healing is the healing in its full sense must be from the inner self. And when somebody else is acting on you, they are intervening somehow, like Pachita did, and they would cause a peeling, yes, but to me, and again, this is my speculation, I may be wrong, but I think that the self is the one that needs to heal the self. And in this case, there are some vulnerabilities that are still exploitable by negative entities in this case. And so this is what caused the breach, I guess, for the possibility of the negative entity and the thought form to separate this healing of time-space and space-time. So in essence, there was a weakness in this healing, in this attachment, and the attachment word that I'm using here is just the mending of time-space and space-time in the renal, because we all have, obviously, we have a metaphysical body, and then we have a physical body, but they're both merged with each other. They both work in unison. This is why healing in time-space also manifests in space-time as healing. My cancer went away all of a sudden. I didn't do any treatment. I just decided to do what I love the last years that they said I have in my life. So what healed is the time-space direction, where the person goes through the process of alleviating those distortions that they had for causing the cancer in the first place. So it's funny how in some people, cancer or other disease triggers the healing in the mind, and then they go through their life renewed. So what I'm referring to here and trying to explain about what Ra said is that there is a time space and a space time analogous self, and because of the type of healing that Carla received, then there was a weakness, a weak link, and this is what the negative entity tried to exploit into causing her death by separating this. That's why Ra says that the way those who know the way to separate time-space molding and space-time distortions. So the molding of space-time or time-space with space-time. The wording is very confusing because they say to separate time-space molding and space-time distortions which are being unmolded. So we're basically referring to the same mechanism here. The space-time unmolded part would be, I suppose, the kidney in this case that is being affected, and it'll become vulnerable as before the healing. So it will return to its distortion as it was before the healing of Pachita. And so it's really complicated stuff of metaphysics and how, this is fifth density work in any case, just like Pachita's healing is possibly fifth or sixth density work. And I would think then it would be fifth if it was affected by, I don't know, I'm just speculating here, but really high stuff that this poor mind of yours truly is very ignorant on. So that's what was happening. Some time-space shenanigans by the fifth density entity. And you can see the sensitivity of this channeling just by noticing how vulnerable somebody like Carla was. Somebody who was fully dedicated. And yes, she had a lot of physical distortion, so that's where the negatives went to. And they were almost successful. So if they would not have done that, would Carla be dead? Probably. So Don continues. Of course, he's very interested in all of this and worried at the very least. And he says, what detrimental effect has been done? Ra says, there will be some discomfort. However, we were fortunate in that this instrument was very open to us and well tuned. Had we not been able to reach this instrument and instruct you, the instrument's physical vehicle would soon be unviable. All right, that answers my question. Yes, if Ra would not have been able to reach Carla or the body of Carla and give them the instructions. So if Ra would not have been able to say the words at the beginning of the session, then Carla would have died. The instrument's physical vehicle would soon be unviable. It's just another way of saying she would have died. Really heavy stuff, my friends. This is something that, it just makes me give so much more merit to their continuation onto doing this channeling, knowing that the thing that we fear the most as Westerners, which is death, could have been accomplished in just one single mistake. That would freak me out. I'll be honest. I would not like to engage in these activities at all. Well, funny enough, I'm not interested in channeling. Believe it or not, I get a lot of questions sometimes about channelings, and people send me other channels and so on. I am, at best, a philosopher who likes to get information of different sources and tie in together their connections, their I'm eclectic by nature. I just like to take things from everywhere and make my own model of reality. The fact that I do this on the Law of One is because, honestly, this is the philosophy that made the most sense to me to connect everything in the world. Spirituality, science, history, metaphysics, simple repressed technology. I mean, anything that we can think about, we can find in the philosophy of the Confederation. And of course, the raw materials. So, but yeah, I am not. I'm interested sometimes in the information that some channels provide, but I'm not interested. I don't channel myself. Some people ask me questions about if I channel. I don't channel. I don't find that attractive. It's not my thing. And I guess the more the reason for me to want to do rituals and this kind of stuff, because I would not want to put somebody's life at risk. And yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to see and analyze these events that actually happen within the channeling of the raw material. Carla would have died. Easy as that. Anyhow, that's question 5. Let's go to question 6, where Don still asks about this and says, will there be any lasting effect from this attack as far as the instrument's physical vehicle is concerned? Ra already mentioned that she would have some discomfort, but Don wants to know if there is some permanent effect that will happen. Ra says, this is difficult to say. We are of the opinion that no lasting harm or distortion will occur. The healer was strong, and the bonds taking effect in the remolding of these renal distortions were effective. It is at this point a question of two forms of the leavings of what you may call a spell or a magic working. The healer's distortions versus the attempt at Orion distortions. The healer's distortion, full of love, the Orion distortions, also pure in separation. It seems that all is well except for some possible discomfort, which shall be attended if persistent. So, what will happen to Carla in the near future, meaning after this session? Ra says it's difficult to say, but they think no lasting harm or distortion will occur. This seems to be the case. Carla lasted us another 30-something years after this. So, now what they say is interesting. The healer was strong. The healer was Pachita. She's the one that created the bonds in time-space for reconfiguration of the renal system, or the kidneys. And so that's why they say the bonds taking effect in the remolding of these renal distortions were effective. Because Pachita was, again, phenomenal. She was just, I don't know, I don't have words, but the things that I've heard about what she did were incredible. I believe Pachita was also, there was, I forgot, I don't know if it was Timothy Leary who went there, or somebody else, about psychedelics. She had mushrooms, I believe. I may be wrong, I don't want to keep talking because I think, but there is a connection there, I think. Yes, maybe. In any case, maybe I'm confusing my history here. But Pachita was very, very good at what she did. So that's what Ra is referring to here. This is the remolding of the renal distortions. It is at this point a question of two forms of the leavings of what you may call a spell or a magic working. So these are the two things. The working that Pachita did is one magic, let's call it that, or spell. And then there is the distortion that the Orion group did to try to kill Carla this time. And so it is a question of which one's going to prevail, Orion or Pachita. And it seems like Pachita prevailed in her work. Ra further says that the healer's distortions full of love, the Orion distortions also pure in separation. You can see the what we would perceive negative in the sense that they are of a separation nature. They see themselves separate from everybody and anything. They are simply the masters of the universe. And so these distortions that are of pure in separation can only come from higher density beings, especially somebody from fifth density, where their intensity of seeking is similar. It's the same as somebody of fifth density in the positive path, only that is in separation, not in unity or love, which is really the feeling of unity. Love is the feeling of unity. That's why the negatives can't have any love, because love will incite this feeling of unity. And although some at 4 density, negative 4 density, realize this, about 20% Ra says, and then they switch their polarity into positive. Although that happens, the vast majority of them continue on in the path of separation, simply shutting the heart, not allowing their feelings to disentangle their own distortions of separation. And so, but their seeking is the same. Their willpower is the same, as powerful. So that's why the healer's distortions were full of love, Pachita's positive intentions, and then the Orion group. It seems that all is well except for some possible discomfort, which shall be attended if persistent. That's the last thing that Ra says there. And we can go to the next question, where Don says, was the opening that was made in the protective circle planned to be made by the Orion entity? Was it a specific planned attempt to make an opening, or was this something that just happened by accident? Ra says, this entity was, as your people put it, looking for a target of opportunity. The missed word was a chance occurrence and not a planned one. We might suggest in the, shall we say, future, as you measure space-time, as you begin a working, be aware that this instrument is likely being watched for any opportunity. Thus, if the circle is walked with some imperfection, it is well to immediately repeat, the expelling of breath is also appropriate, always to the left. So, okay. This was not planned. This was just waiting for. They were lurking, or it was lurking, whatever it was. I don't know, I just can't say he or she. The entity was lurking. It was on the prowl, waiting for that moment. And it found its window of opportunity. So the missed word, just a simple word that was missed, how can that affect and open the circle? I'm baffled. I really don't know how this works. So then they give the instruction, if this happens again, all you need to do is just rewalk the circle and expel the breath. So perfection. And I mean, I would think that Don and Jim weren't obviously highly adepts in rituals and so on. So what they did all the time was just phenomenal. So all they had to do was redo it again. And I guess that speaks of the purity of their seeking, which is in essence what Ra always said. And they're going to repeat it here, so I'm not going to talk about it until we get there. But it speaks about the purity of their seeking to channel this information. So let's go on, see if I can cover the vast majority of this. In question 8, Don says, would you expand on what you just said about the expelling of breath? I wasn't quite sure what you meant. Ra says, the repetition of that performed well at this working is advisable if the circle is walked in less than the appropriate configuration. So the repetition of that performed, which is the breath, that performed well at this working is advisable. The wording sometimes gets me. Again, English is not my second language. Sometimes I just read things and they just don't make sense. But the repetition of the breath as they did it is advisable if the circle is walked in less than appropriate configuration. So if they think they did it incorrectly. Question 9, Don says, but you mentioned the expelling of the breath to the left, I believe. Would you tell me what you meant by that? And this is where Ra says, it is as you have just accomplished, the breath being sent above the instrument's head from its right side to its left. So the expelling of the breath, there's a couple of things that I can pick up here. First is, why breath? You see, breath is energy. Breath is life. We only see it as like, okay, breath just brings oxygen, and oxygen keeps us alive. But that's just our reductionist way of seeing life, or seeing metabolism, or the body, and the human in general. Breath is such an important part in our life. It's the first level of nutrition. You see, this is just common sense. The second level of nutrition being water. The third being food. And so you can last without food longer than without water, and you can last longer without water than without breath. And this is why breath is so important. Is chi. It's the same chi that we use, or prana. This is the pranayama. And so when you use breath, you can even, just to link breath with spirituality and states of mind, DMT has been found in the lungs. Yes, the pineal gland produces DMT as well, but the breath is what triggers this production of DMT. And the opposite is also true. You don't need DMT if you're so rooted in reality. If you're so rooted in your life and survival is the most important thing, then DMT is possibly not necessary, because you're just in that survival mode. Unless you bring it to the extreme, then DMT says hello again. Near-death experience and so on. But the vast majority of stress, mental stress that people live on, is just suppressing that DMT, melatonin, and so on. This is why we have so many disorders in our sleeping patterns and everything else. But simple breathing will bring back this balance of chemicals in the body. And this is why we have breathing exercises that promote this DMT production, and people have these amazing experiences. I remember from the beginning when I started playing with my breathing exercises, I had some phenomenal experiences, and this became more the norm as your body regularizes this production of DMT. Some really amazing stuff happen in the body. I really recommend anybody to have a routine of breathing every day. You don't have to have any, you don't need anything other than breathing, which you do all the time. You don't need anything specific. Just learn any technique. Do the Wim Hof. The Wim Hof technique is brilliant for this. There are others. You can play with others. Just find here on YouTube. It's free. And start doing breathing. All you need to do is go through the process of breathing yourself. So, and getting used to this feeling. It's very weird. Do it safely too. If you don't, you're gonna get the instructions on this if you delve into breathing techniques, but seriously, do it safe, because you may faint. That's all that may happen. You will faint because your mind simply cannot take this production of DMT and other chemicals in your body that are relaxing you. So, speaking of breath, it feels so good. Do it now. Just do it now. Just pause for a second, or I'll make a silence. I'll be silent for a second and just breathe. And exhale. You can just feel it in your body. And this is available to us 24/7. At any moment, it's there. You just breathe. Sighing at the end is really good too. Anyhow, this is the law of one. This is not me teaching breathing techniques. So, why the breath? You can see why it's so powerful. And Ra calls it the righteousness, the breath of righteousness. Why to the left? Because the left of our body is more susceptible to the negative messages, information, or our negative side is almost always on the left. The vast majority, I guess, of our vortices are negative on the left side. So there is an opening there. And so it's, I suppose, part of the ritual to breathe towards that side. But yeah, that's all I can take from this. Then question 10, Don says, is there anything we can do for the instrument after she comes out of trance to help her recover from this attack? Ra says, there is little to be done. You may watch to see if distortions persist and see that the appropriate healers are brought into contact with this mind-body-spirit complex. In the event that difficulty persists, it may not. This battle is even now being accomplished. Each may counsel the instrument to continue its work as outlined previously. This battle that they talk about here. Well, first of all, Ra says there is little to be done. Let's just observe and see what happens to Carla. And if the distortions persist, then she can find the appropriate healers, which we will talk about shortly. And in the event that it persists, simply. We'll talk about this in a little bit. This battle is even now being accomplished, meaning that there is still a tug of war between the positive and the negative. The distortions that were there and exacerbated by the negative entity, and the healing distortions that were placed in there by Pachita. So I suppose it's just like when you get sick, there are negative distortions in your body that are causing these disruptions, and you're feeling that you're weaker, and then your immune system is trying to bring homeostasis back into the fold, and you have this tug of war for a little while until it settles down. So I suppose metaphysically this is what's happening too. So we're moving fast. I like this. Question 11. Don says, who would the appropriate healers be, and how would we bring them in contact with the instrument? Ra says there are 4. The difficulty being at all noticed as bodily distortion. Did I read that right? The difficulty being at all noticed as bodily distortion. The one known as Don and the one known as Jim may work upon the instrument's bodily complex by means of the practices which are developing in each entity. Given persistence of distortion, the one known as Stuart shall be seen. Given the continued difficulty past the point of one of your cycles called the fortnight, the one known as Douglas shall be seen. Okay, so who are these healers? Ra says there are 4, Don and Jim, we know, and they would help and heal with the healing techniques that they were provided by Ra. These are the ones that Ra says the practices which are developing in each entity. These are the healing techniques that Ra gave them. Then, given persistence of distortion, so if Carla just feels sicker over time, then they could see Stuart. And if this continues even longer, then they would go and see Douglas. So it depends on how Carla feels. So I would say that the first is just love and light through energy healing that Don and Jim were capable of doing. If it persisted, then Stuart would be next. And then if it kept going, then Douglas would be the last resort for them. Don continues and says, does the instrument know who these people are? Stuart and Douglas. I don't know who they are. And Ross says, this is correct. Don says, is that the sum total of what we can do to aid the instrument? Ross says, this is correct. We may note that the harmonies of loving social intercourse which prevails habitually in this group create a favorable environment for each of you to do your work. This is important, I think, because how can I say this? The importance. I'm just going to emphasize the importance of being in a loving environment. If you're sick, the love that people give you and just the state of well-being around wherever you are, it could be your family, your friends, it could be the neighbor, it could be anybody that provides that support, that loving support. Sometimes this is even more important. And I would say, not sometimes, all of the time, I think it's more important than the healing being done by a doctor or nurses or people that come and take care of you because it's their job. Nothing against these people, of course. I think they're just angels in disguise. But unfortunately, the system in which they work is just precarious in the sense of allowing people to be. I mean, even the research, and apologies for going on a tangent here, but I really want to, since we're talking about healing, I think this is important. We need to always remember that the environment in which people are treated is more important than any treatment that can be provided. So you can see this in our hospitals. They are devoid of life. Everything is electronics. Everything is super clean and sterile. Not sterile in the sense of micro sterility, but sterile in just behavior in general. The walls, everything is devoid of life. No wonder why we have research that shows that when people are in hospitals and their window, just their window, looks outside to nature, they heal faster than people who were treated with the same condition and their windows looked towards a wall. Believe me, there are hospitals like this, I've been there, and they just don't see anything. They just see the wall of the next building or something else that is just dead. It's inert, and people heal faster. And this is in hospitals. Now, think of people that go into nature to be healed, and they do. It's really the mind doing all of this work. It's not really the chemicals. The chemical are acting upon, yes, the physical complex. They do things. I'm not saying they don't, but we need to take into consideration this, at least for the future. Right now, it is what it is. The people that work there. Compare the people that work there with your grandma or your mother or friend, sister, whatever, family or friends that want to take care of you and bring you things. Compare that to beeping somebody who's been overworked for more than 60 hours a week, a nurse or an assistant nurse, because now we have so many hierarchies in hospitals coming and trying to say, all right, hello, what do you want? What a difference, just feeling that you're being treated as a nuisance. you know. Like Alan Watts said, hospitals are run for the convenience of the staff, not for the patients. This is true. So the doctors, you barely see a doctor. They only come there to, and it's sad, I mean, I have to say this, some doctors just go in because they can get a paycheck. Seriously, like they would go visit you and say, hey, I realize you're sick and I'm a specialist and I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, and then they leave. They don't really care about you. They really care about putting a note, and this is because they're underpaid and overworked. I mean, it's just terrible. It's the system. It's not the doctors. It's not the nurses. People are, like I said, people are angels, especially working in these conditions and in these areas. But it's just the system. So, yeah, the environment is much more important. This is what Ra is referring to here. At least I know I took it into a longer tangent than it was warranted, I suppose. Oh, whatever. Why am I apologizing for this? It was a good side note. So, yes, we may note that the harmonies and loving social intercourse. By the way, loving social intercourse does not mean sex, although it could include sex, but it's just social intercourse, just hanging out, okay, in our terms, in our what's the word, slang, is hanging out, the loving hanging out, which prevails habitually in this group, create a favorable environment for each of you to do your work. What is the work? Healing. So you can see why I connected all of this into this answer that Ra gave. So we go on with question 14. Don says, what priority, shall I say, does the Orion group place upon the reduction of effectiveness or elimination of effectiveness of this group with respect to activities on planet Earth at this time? Can you tell me that? Ra says, this group, as all positive channels and supporting groups, is a greatly high priority with the Orion group. This instrument's bodily distortions are its most easily unbound or unloosed distortion, dissolving the mind-body-spirit complex if the Orion... I'm reading terribly today, I'm sorry. Let me reread this. This instrument's bodily distortions are its most easily unbound or unloosed distortion, dissolving the mind-body-spirit complex if the Orion group is successful. This particular group having learned to be without serious chinks, may we say, in mind and spirit, complex vibratory patterns. In other channels, other chinks may be more in evidence. Yeah, I don't know what's with me today. Maybe I need some water. Let's get some water. See? The second level of nutrition was needed. So, Ra says, this group, Don is asking, what is the priority that Orion group has towards them compared to everything else happening on planet Earth at the time? And Ra simply says that all positive channel, just like this group, is a high priority for the Orion group. And because they were so strong in their mind and spirit complex, the body is what they wanted to attack, because that's the one more easily unbound, unloosed, and that's what the Orion group was looking for. This is the chink in their armor. That's what they had. The Carla's body, the distortions. So, Don, Jim had very healthy bodies, I would suppose. And their minds were all very completely very well oriented, not susceptible to the inflating of the ego, which is really what they look for. That's the chink in most of the channels, actually. There's always a sense of ego, or that wanting to help by predicting the future, or Something to that effect. There's always a weakness in channels that would allow this information to be introduced, and that's probably better for them than to kill somebody. It sounds like killing would be the most nefarious thing they could do, but that's not how they earn polarity. That's not how they earn their tokens of negativity. They earn it by distorting reality. You see, the only thing that negatives can do is distort reality, is to manipulate reality, and that's a lot more effective. Look at everything that we have on Earth. It's just a distortion of truth, a distortion of love. And it is so well played that we have such a system that we have grown used to it. And this is all the product of years and years and years of perfecting this system of separation. I mean, inherently, everybody knows that we're all one. You ask anybody and they would naturally say, yes, I do believe that we're all connected. I just can't see it in the world. So their visions have been so distorted that they cannot see externally what they feel inside. If people could reflect on this, not even meditate, but reflect on this long enough, they would see that something is missing in their lives, and they would want to seek. What is to seek? The one. Unity, love, compassion, understanding. They would go into their inner self and say, why am I not being compassionate? Why am I not being loving? Why do I still hate people? Why do I still reject this? Why do I feel separate about this? Just by noticing this cognitive dissonance in people. And I'm telling you, the vast majority of people go and do the test. Ask anybody. Go text your best friend or somebody else who is not into the raw material or spirituality and ask them, do you feel at the core of your being that we're all connected? That we're all one? In whichever way you phrase it. Because philosophically, some people are going to say, well, it seems reasonable that we are, or it seems nice that we are one, but reasonably we can, logically we're supposed to be blah, blah, blah. No, just go into their inner feeling. People are going to say, yes, I do believe so. But their worldview is in direct conflict with that. And this is why people suffer, actually. The disconnection between what they actually feel inside and what they actually see outside. So, yeah, this is, I don't know why I digressed here, but was it because of the mind? Was it because of, I forget. But yeah, there you go. You get an extra from me. So this is the chink in their armor, physical distortions in Carla. Unfortunately, but that's what they had to deal with. Question 15. Don says, I'll make the statement and you correct me. The Orion Group has as an objective the bringing of service to self polarized entities to harvest as great a harvest as possible. This harvest will build their potential or their ability to do work in consciousness as given by the distortion of the law of one called the law of squares or doubling. Is this correct? And Ra says this is correct. So here's a good point. We're getting out of the psychic attack now into the Orion Group. Don says that his statement is what we can analyze here because Ra already said that this is correct. The Orion Group has the objective of harvesting the vast majority of entities who are negative on this planet. And this harvest will build their potential or their ability to do work in consciousness, which is really what they want to do in fourth and fifth density. In sixth density too, but then they encounter themselves in a pickle because for them to continue on the path of godliness, they have to merge with the universe. So they say, oops, all right, wrong path, I submit to unity. And so they pass the beginning stages of sixth density. They need to merge with unity. And that means love and understanding as well. So they, as it were, unblock themselves. And the feeling must be really something to behold, right? Of you blocking your heart for the whole path all the way up to sixth density, and all of a sudden explosion of the heart. My God, what an experience for the negatives. Talk about a mystical experience, an intense mystical experience. Oh God. That's ecstasy. You see, when people say, oh, how can I see negatives as myself? Think about yourself experiencing this eventually. Wow. What a blast, literally. So, okay, Don is just asking, is this the mechanism that happens, or that the Orion group is interested in? Do they want to bring service to self polarization to entities so that they can increase the harvest of negative entities? It's almost like recruiting. Let's just put it this way. All the humans who are negative here, let me speak of the vast majority of people who are negative, right? You be the judge of that. I can't really say. But in general, we can say that the people who are seeking domination, manipulation, control over others, whether this be in institutions or in family or in mafias or syndicates now, we can call it that, banking system, corporations, etc. We have a network that is easily usable for those who are completely psychopathic in their nature, and they can follow this path of full separation. Of course, over time, they would have to go through harder and harder trials, which mean even selling your own mother if you want to, having no compassion at all for anybody, because the only thing that exists is you. So a lot of people fail in this. They fail in this path. It's a very difficult path. It's not easy, but some people are on this path unbeknownst to themselves as to what is leading them to. It's up to a certain level that they say, this is enough. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep exploiting people. I can't keep destroying people's lives because it benefits me. They feel something in their hearts and they wake up. So I suppose this is happening more rapid than before, but there is still the system. The system is in place right now. Money, power, titles, and just any sort of positions, hierarchies. It's all there. And so this is what the Orion group is desiring. They want to highly polarize these entities so they can eventually, when they die, they can recruit them or continue to manipulate them. I suppose if we could talk about a sort of, let's call it food, right? I forgot what they call it in metaphysics. I forgot. Luge. Yes, luge. Although luge is also used for, I don't want to use the word luge because that's used for if people are scared, then they're emitting that energy and negative entities feed from that. I want to use a higher luge, higher food, or food. This food is the negative polarization, that negative energy that some can use in higher and higher dimensions. Just like your typical governor, let's just say, somebody who is above you in the hierarchy, they can use you and use your energy for their benefit. They don't do anything. They just control you for their benefit. And that energy they use to highly polarize themselves. They are on a higher dimension than you because you need to learn how to dominate them. And once you're able to dominate them, then hey, you are the master now. And so this is just the negative energy that people use. And in the higher dimensions, you bet that this is what's happening. They're using their human counterpart for subtraction of energy. But they want to actually make people harvestable. They want to harvest these people to higher densities, because if I can recruit you, let's say I'm 4 density negative and you are 3rd density negative, and if I can recruit you into 4 density, then the work that you will be able to do will be higher. And because I have learned more, I am above you, and then I can continue to control you and manipulate you. But if you learn how to control me, then there is some spiritual entropy happening in this dynamic, and I lose some of my negative polarity. This can happen also. Remember, we talked about this a couple of sessions ago, where Ra said that the negatives can get into a sort of contract or binding with the human, and the human can actually bid the higher dimensional entity. So this whole struggle between one and the other is really what's happening here. And they can get a lot of this food to highly polarize themselves. This is what Don is asking when they say, let's read Don's question again. The Orion group has as an objective the bringing of service to self polarized entities to harvest, to recruit them into 4 density. As great a harvest as possible. Sure. As great a recruitment as possible. This harvest will build their potential or their ability to do work in consciousness, as given by the distortion of the law of one called the law of squares or doubling. This means that the more people you have under your control, the higher it is exponentially your polarization, your negative polarization. So Don is right on the money here and is speaking truth to the effect of the Orion group and what they do. So it's a very intricate dynamic that they have. So I think I'm going to leave it at this. We have more to cover. It's going to be all Orion group and still some psychic attack for next video. The next question we have, question 16, is exploring even more the Orion group. So how about we leave it for next week and we can end it here precisely at the hour. Conclusions. I don't think there's much to say here because we only talked about dynamics of psychic attack and everything else. I guess what I could say, just to ease people's mind, because I do get a lot of questions about this, maybe because I just don't feel at all vulnerable to this. It's not that I feel invulnerable, but I just don't think about these things anymore. But I do get a lot of questions, and I remember myself being at the beginning stages. Let me just give you a short story of myself. I think I've mentioned this in the past. When I was a kid, I was afraid of monsters and spirits and all of this. I mean, how could I not be? I grew up in the 80s and 90s with Poltergeist and The Exorcist and, all this creepy spiritual things and demons. Oh my God, I was so afraid, terrified by these possible entities. But science came to the rescue and told me all of that is nonsense. All of that doesn't exist. And I was just like, yes, I found the relief of my life. I don't have to suffer through the possibility of these entities living and, affecting me. No dreams, no apparitions. They're all mental projections. Well, what was my surprise at my 36 years of age, 36? I was 36 or 38? 36, 38, 36. Yes, nice age, nice number. When I realize that, well, spirits actually exist. So, I mean, the first couple of weeks, it was, wow, this is amazing. This is beautiful. This is great. But then this old fear crept up on me on demons. If spirituality is true, then demons are true. This brought back the fear, the old fear, decades old, of maybe seeing ghosts, demons, apparitions, and it was just scary. But I remember that was the focus of my attention at that time, and I said, I didn't know anything about the law of one. I didn't know anything much about psychedelics and these entities that you can see, which are negative, and they can, I forgot what they called them, but they're, let's call them demons, that they can haunt you and get in your mind and possess you and so on. So that's what I was barely aware at the time, and I just said, like, okay, I need to find something. Luckily, within days, I remember doing this, and I learned through my teacher at the time that, and this clicked with me, this was the realization for me forever, and so I want to share this with you, is that no negative entity, I can bring it even to a deeper level, which is really how I stand today. No negative entity can affect you unless you give him permission. So all you need to do is recite in yourself and say, I don't give permission to any negative entity to manipulate my own distortions. That's just not, I do not consent. Just like exactly what we can do on this planet, but the vast majority want to consent to what the government says. So we're still in that pickle. So, but it's the same mechanism. By you saying, I do not consent, simply, nobody can do anything to you. No human, nobody. But you have to really recite on yourself. You have to be that one being that says, I do not consent. Whatever you do, it's on you. I don't want to participate in this. Period. No hatred, no nothing. You understand the other person. Is you abiding on yourself and saying, this is who I am, and you cannot manipulate me. Period. You can do whatever you want to my body. We're talking about the humans, of course, who can do things physically, but I don't agree to this. And you keep living your life based on your decisions, of course, which is really what most people are afraid of. What would happen if I choose what I want to do? Or if I don't do what I don't want to do? Or I don't do, what I don't want to do. I mean, just simple, right? It just rings so simple. But in any case, in the metaphysical world, this is even more important or more powerful because it is you. You are not allowing this to happen. Now, to bring it to another level, you are pure light, meaning that no shadow can cover your light. Does that make sense? I mean, if you're a light, have you ever seen a shadow cover a light bulb? No, unless the other light is more intense. But that's usually how we learn to be brighter. It's not, it doesn't dim the light. It just shows that there are brighter lights out there. So even here, I'm talking about somebody more illuminated, brighter, on the positive path. On the negative path, no shadow can actually dim your light. And all you can do is shine brighter. So this realization just gave me the power to know that nobody can affect me unless I allow it to happen. And sure, sometimes we're unaware of the things that we can do or allow others to do to us. This is why we're easily manipulated. So you have to clear everything. There is a saying that says, If you're easily offended, you're easily manipulated. So don't be offended. Be merrily happy with anything that happens in your life. Just laugh at everything. I'm just giving simple instructions here, but I know they're hard. In any case, you are in control. Now, the last step, or the last level that I can take you so far here, is that, and this is where I stand today, that all negative entities, as well as positive entities, are you. And if you can reside in this oneness, this pure consciousness that you are, which is really the best way we can explain it in human terms, awareness. When you are aware that you are aware, something funny happens. You realize that the whole universe is awareness. So what you call you is just a finite portion contracted into this awareness. And anything, the whole universe is you. So when you see yourself as the universe, or you see the universe as yourself, the negative entities have no higher or lesser quality than anybody. Just aspects of yourself. Just like the pine tree and the flower are no different than each other. They're one and the same in that view. They may look different from the finite mind, but they are the same. And so this is my best advice for anybody who may be afraid or affected by the possibility of negative entities, haunting them. You're allowing them, and all you need to do, if they are, because I know people are affected by this, that means you have chinks in your armor. They are inviting you to show yourself what is it that is affecting you. What can you do? And so, with that, I come to the end of this video, this first part of session 62. I have nothing else to say, but subscribe to my email list if you want to be in the loop of all the things that I'm doing. I'm doing a whole revamp on my website and my courses and my seminars and so on. So I want to know, who are you? Who of you are interested in this philosophy? I want to know. Please leave me your email in the link that I have provided. It's my website. As soon as you get to my website, you see a beautiful picture of myself there in nature, and all you have to do is put your email. You're gonna get my course and all that stuff. Go check it out. It's fun stuff. It's free. You're not gonna get any spam from me, obviously. I barely send an email now and then, but I appreciate that. That's all I'm going to ask of you today. What else? Oh no, I have something else to ask. Keep shining bright. Be yourself. Love yourself. And everything will become brighter. I love you. I'll see you in part 2 of session 62.